Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Dave from Whelan Cameras. We're joined here today with Adrian Gaynor from Nikon. We're just after holding a tips for better landscape photography in situ here in our little classroom. We're about to go down, we're in Limerick, we're about to go down to King John's Castle, and Adrian has very kindly agreed to shoot a few little clips on how to improve your landscape photography, a kind of a very quick do's and don'ts. He'll be using a D850 with a 16 to 35 lens for that slightly wider kind of view. Over to you, Adrian.
Well, thank you.
What do you suggest we do?
Well, basically I'm excited about going out there with a few people and putting a few tips into practice. And a lot of you guys watching this video will probably be aware of most of this, but it's always wise to think of your focal points when shooting a landscape photograph. Create a point of interest. And it's widely believed that if that point of interest is not central to the image but is in what's called in the law of thirds, that helps. It gives compositional value to your landscape, and it gives the viewer's eye somewhere to go. So think of your focal point. You can use horizon lines, you can use leading lines, or a foreground element to lead the eye in towards that focal point.
To build value in the front.
Yes, exactly, and also it creates interest and leads the eye in. It's not mandatory, but it's probably better to use a good tripod.
Sure.
Especially with the use of creative filters being so vogue and so now, and it's kind of a hot thing for people to use.
Well, especially where we're going, because we're going to have a river in front of us, so
Right.
You're going to get movement on the water. If you use filters, it would certainly look much better if it's on a tripod rather than you just really couldn't do it handheld anyway.
Well, you couldn't, and there's no way of knowing what looks good with or without a neutral density filter without trying
it.
And you can't try it without a tripod.
Yeah.
So also for very low light conditions, if you're doing cityscapes, then of course a tripod is pretty important.
Yeah.
Buy a good tripod if you don't have one, and have one that's very comfortable to use, because you'll own it a long time.
Yeah.
And you want to get used to
They
it.
last. I mean, they pick up a good tripod should take a little bit of hard use.
Oh yeah.
And keep going.
And you bond with a tripod.
Yeah. You bond with it.
I bond with my tripods. Yeah. Another tip would be to take advantage of any uniqueness in the photograph, whether it might be seasonal changes, if you have any snow or autumn leaves, or if it's cold or if it's hot. Try and have elements in your photograph that show that quality, and it helps put the viewer there where you're at, helps put them in the scene.
Yeah, I mean, I think yesterday we had a shoot at Killaloo, and unfortunately the weather gods weren't kind and we got rained out. But you can check that. I mean, you might have to come back several times to the same place just to figure out where the sun is best, or where the water looks better, reflections, your aspects.
Yeah.
But one thing we do use a lot is YR.NO, and it's a weather-based application. It's very accurate to a very, very finite area. So if you kind of tap in where you are, it gets very, very good wind and rain and what you can expect on the day.
Excellent.
So we definitely recommend that.
That's a great tip. So that was actually going to be one of my next tips, is to plan the shot, and part of that is of course being very cognizant of the weather forecast.
We got rained out yesterday, so
Yeah, hey,
I think it's a case
weather
of
can change very fast.
Absolutely.
Also, be aware of any sunrise, sunset times, moonrise, moonset. And a great application for that is called the photographer's ephemeris. It's a fairly inexpensive download onto any mobile device, and it allows you to have all that information at your hands. And it even goes further than that, where you can see visually where the sunlight will be hitting which hills first at certain times of the morning. It's very, very complete. But yeah, plan your shot. Also, if you can get an idea of pre-visualizing what you'd like to accomplish, that's critical, because it's okay having the technique to to be able to create different types of photographs. But if you don't know what you're looking for in the first place, you can't create it. So pre-visualization is really very, very...
Have your end goal in sight.
Exactly. Consider the depth of field. There are different schools of thought here. There are some people that prefer to use a smaller aperture and have a larger depth of field. And then there are other landscape photographers who prefer a shallower depth of field and to blur the foreground or the part of the background to help concentrate the viewer look at a certain part of the image.
They're two very distinct kind of schools. I mean, you get different...
Yeah, there's no right or wrong.
No.
But something that is kind of accepted, contrary to some people's beliefs, is it's probably best to stay away from very small apertures, f/16 or smaller, because the lens starts to run into diffraction and you'll lose image detail. So quite often people use focus stacking. And you shoot at the sweet spot of the lens and then shoot multiple images at different points of focus throughout the image and then combining them, stack them, so you have unlimited depth of field and you're using the lens at its optimum aperture at that point. So that's also a nice technique.
Yeah. We might try and go through that when we get down to the river a little bit more, because I think that frightens people, myself included. You know, it's just one of those things where it sounds easier said than done.
It's not that difficult once you start doing it. It becomes actually quite easy once you start doing it. This might sound silly, but hey, I've been caught out with this. Make sure you wear the right footwear and outerwear for wherever you're going. If it's going to be chilly, you don't want to be uncomfortable. And if you're walking on any footpaths that are not, they're mud, and there's been recent rain, and you're carrying a lot of expensive gear, or even worse, if you have a precipitous fall at the cliff edge, you want to have a sure footing. So make sure you have the right footwear, make sure you have the right outerwear, and when you get to your location, the chances are you'll be in a situation and you might think, this is good, but I've got a feeling the light's getting better and better and better, so you could be there for a lot longer than you thought you might be. So take some water and some snacks. Just something to take away the hunger pangs, you know, and...
no worse feeling.
No, right, so stay comfortable. If you need to bracket, then that's another tip. Exposing either side of the recommended exposure from your camera's meter. If you have a very contrasty or a wide dynamic range in your image, it's a way of helping to ensure that you have an exposure that you're happy with.
Especially where we're going now, we're going to be shooting the river, a castle, and then the skyline. And if you bracket there, you're basically able to make maybe a sky that could be a little bit wishy-washy. And if you bracket, you can afford to then go in just to the top part of your picture. And because you've bracketed, you could make that darker and angrier. And
absolutely.
More prolific, it really jumps out at you then.
Yeah, and you could sandwich those exposures, so you can have the slightly longer exposure for your foreground and the briefer exposure for your sky. Of course, you can use filters to achieve that same effect as well. Always check your photographs for critical sharpness before you move on to the next shot, and get right in there and check it thoroughly, because there's nothing worse than getting home and having what appears to be what would have been your best shot and have it just be a hair out of focus. It's happened to me.
What's happened to, I think, that's one we've all come a cropper on.
Because you go in, but you don't go in all the way, and you think, oh wow, yeah, I've nailed it.
Yeah.
But then you get home and
to find it, you're going back to shoot it another time.
And maybe you'll never have the opportunity again.
Yeah, depending.
So always check for critical focus, and take your time. Enjoy the process. Every time you go out and take landscapes, there's no guarantee you're going to get a great shot. So it's all about enjoying what you're doing and having fun with it. So that's about it.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to go down to the river now and shoot King John's Castle. So,
Does the king know we're coming?
Depends which is the king.
Thank you, David.